The Galactic Alliance chamber floated like a jewel above the glowing blue world of Altheris Prime. Its walls shimmered with silver light, and its ceiling opened to the stars, so every species could see the universe they were sworn to protect, together. It was here that the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy met to make decisions that shaped countless worlds. When the human delegation entered, the chamber fell into whispers. They were small compared to the towering insectoids of the Catheri, fragile next to the crystalline bodies of the Orcs, and plain compared to the radiant scaled warriors of the Dravaks. Humanity was the youngest member of the Alliance, and many still doubted why they had been accepted at all. Ambassador Elias Ward walked at the front, his jaw tense but his posture firm. Behind him came Captain Mira Solis, commander of the Human Fleet, and Commander Darius Hale, her trusted strategist. Mira felt the weight of every stare. She knew what the others thought. Humans were reckless, fragile, untested. Some called them children of the dirt because of their humble beginnings on a single storm-battered world. The High Speaker of the Alliance, a crystalline Orcs whose voice rang like chimes, struck the podium. Representatives of the Alliance, a matter of grave concern is before us. Reports from the frontier speak of a storm unlike any seen before. Entire fleets have vanished into it. Worlds have gone silent. We call it the Maelstrom. The chamber grew tense. Images flickered into the air, holograms of star systems being consumed by shifting clouds of light and darkness, waves of energy that twisted space itself, and broken ships drifting like corpses. Even the mighty Dravaks ships, famous for their armor, were torn apart, a reptilian general hissed. It bends gravity. It shreds shields. We have sent 5 fleets. None return. Murmurs spread like fire. Some whispered of abandoning the frontier. Others argued to fortify their inner worlds and leave the outlying colonies to die. Mira clenched her fists. Those were lives they were talking about, millions of civilians abandoned to a storm. She could almost see their faces. Ordinary people who had trusted the Alliance to keep them safe. Ambassador Ward rose. "And what of the humans?" he asked. His voice was steady, but everyone knew the answer. Laughter rippled through the chamber. The insectoid envoy clicked his mandibles. "Humans? Your fleets are fragile toys compared to ours. What could you possibly do that we could not?" Mira felt her blood boil, but she kept silent. She had faced storms on Earth that no alien here could imagine. Tornadoes that tore cities apart, earthquakes that split the ground, wars that tested the soul. Humanity had survived all of it. That was their strength, survival. Ward's eyes flicked to Mira, giving her the chance. She stepped forward, her voice calm but burning. "We'll go." The chamber erupted. Cries of disbelief and laughter shook the hall. "Madness! Suicide! Childish bravado!" The crystalline High Speaker tilted his head. "You would risk your fleet? Knowing others greater than you have fallen?" "Yes," Mira said simply. Her dark eyes never wavered. "Because retreat means death for those who cannot defend themselves. Humanity does not abandon the innocent. If others cannot or will not face the maelstrom, then we will." For a moment, silence fell. Her words echoed in the vast chamber. "Commander." Hale stepped beside her. "Our ships may not be the strongest, but we are flexible. We adapt. What you call weakness, we call creativity. That may be the only way through the storm." The Dravaks warlord rumbled with laughter. "If you wish to throw your lives into the void, so be it. We will watch from safety." Mira smiled faintly. "Then watch closely. You might learn something." The chamber's vote was swift. The Alliance would not send another united fleet, but they would allow the humans to try. It was almost a gesture of mockery, a way to let them prove their recklessness. No one truly expected them to return. That night, Mira stood on the viewing deck of the human flagship Resolute. The stars stretched before her like endless fire, but she felt the storm's shadow in her mind, waiting. Jonah Reyes, her chief engineer, joined her quietly. "You know they think we're mad," he said. "They've always thought that," Mira replied. She turned and he saw the fire in her eyes. "Let them. This is what we do. Humanity's story has always been the same. The world tries to break us, and we survive. The maelstrom will be no different." Jonah smiled, though it was weary. "Then let's make history, Captain." As the fleet prepared to leave orbit, Mira looked back one last time at the Alliance Chamber's towers gleaming on the planet below. Let them doubt. Let them laugh. She would show them what it meant to be human. The engines roared to life, and the human fleet leapt into the unknown. The human fleet cut across the stars, their engines blazing like streaks of fire in the darkness. 12 ships in all, small, fast, and lightly armored compared to the massive vessels of the Alliance. To outsiders, they looked fragile, almost pitiful. But inside those ships, every heart beat with determination. Captain Mira Solis stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her eyes fixed on the endless black ahead. She could feel it even before the sensors picked it up, the maelstrom. A tension in the void, a storm waiting to swallow them whole. "Captain," Commander Darius Hale said quietly, scanning the tactical display. "We're entering its outer edge. Energy readings off the charts. No clear path." Jonah Reyes, his uniform smudged with grease as usual, leaned against a console. "Sensors are half blind already. We'll be flying through madness." Mira's voice was steady. "Then we'll trust instinct. Pilot Chen, take us in." Lyra Chen's hands danced across the controls. She was young, but her reflexes were sharp as lightning. "Aye, Captain." Holding formation. The stars around them began to bend. At first, it was subtle, pinpricks of light stretching into lines like reflections on water. Then the void itself seemed to ripple. Gravity waves struck the fleet, tossing ships like toys. Hulls groaned. Shields flared. Jonah swore under his breath. "This storm's tearing at space itself. It's like flying inside a collapsing star." But the fleet pressed forward. Fragments of broken ships drifted past them, silent reminders of those who had come before. Some bore the markings of the Dravaks, their armor shattered like eggshells. Others were Cathari vessels, their sleek wings torn away. Lyra whispered, "So many." And none survived. Mira's jaw tightened. She could almost hear the echoes of crews who had faced this same storm, who had screamed as their ships broke apart. "We're not them," she said firmly. "Keep moving." The storm grew worse. Great arcs of lightning spanned across the void, but it wasn't lightning as humans knew it. It was energy alive with color, green, violet, crimson, dancing like fire made of plasma. Each strike carried the power to split a warship in half. "Shields failing on the Vigilant," Hale reported, watching the readings. "Tell them to weave, not block," Mira ordered. "Ride the waves, don't fight them." The Vigilant shifted course, twisting through the storm instead of bracing against it. The lightning passed close, grazing their hull, but the ship held. The lesson was clear. Survival would come not from strength, but from agility. Hours passed like days. Every moment was survival. Hull plates buckled, engines screamed, and exhaustion crept into every soul aboard the fleet. In the engineering deck, Jonah worked with sweat pouring down his face. Systems overloaded faster than he could repair them. "She's holding, but just barely," he muttered. His hands were burned from hot circuits, but he refused to stop. On the bridge, Mira never left her post. Her eyes stayed on the storm, watching patterns others might miss. The maelstrom wasn't pure chaos. Beneath the madness, there was rhythm, waves rising and falling, currents twisting in strange harmony. "Hail," she said softly, "plot us a path through those currents. If we flow with them, not against them, we'll save power." Hail nodded, surprised. "Like sailing an ocean." "Exactly," Mira said. "Earth taught us how to survive storms." And so, the fleet moved like ships at sea, weaving between energy surges, slipping past gravity fractures. Slowly, impossibly, they advanced. But then came the sound that froze every heart. A distress call. The Horizon, the youngest ship in the fleet, was caught in a twisting gravity pocket, its hull cracked, alarms blaring. Crew voices filled the comms. "With fear." "Captain," Lyra cried, "they'll be torn apart in minutes." Mira's mind raced. If she ordered a rescue, the Resolute could be dragged down with them. Every tactical rule said to cut them loose, but she thought of the chamber on Altheris Prime, of the laughter and doubt. If humanity abandoned its own, they would prove their enemies, right? "Bring us in," Mira ordered. The crew stared, but none argued. The Resolute dove into the storm, engines straining. Lightning exploded around them. Jonah screamed from engineering. "Hull integrity at 20%! Lyra's hands shook as she threaded the ship through deadly fractures. At the last second, magnetic clamps locked onto the Horizon. With a roar of engines, both ships broke free of the pocket. Cheers erupted across the fleet. On the Horizon, survivors wept openly. Mira exhaled slowly. "No one gets left behind, not while I command." As the fleet regrouped, something strange appeared. "On the scanners." "Captain," Hale whispered, his eyes wide, "this storm isn't natural." The holographic display flickered, showing faint shapes hidden in the maelstrom, massive constructs, like towers of black stone and metal, pulsing with energy. They seemed to anchor the storm, feeding it. Jonah's voice was low, almost fearful. "Someone built this." The crew fell silent. The storm wasn't a wild phenomenon. It was a weapon. Mira's eyes hardened. "Then we're not just fighting the storm. We're fighting whoever controls it." Her words hung in the air, heavier than the storm itself. For the first time, fear and anger mixed in every human heart. But beneath that fear burned something stronger, resolve. If the maelstrom was made by hands, then hands could break it. Humanity would find a way. The storm howled louder, as if mocking them. But the fleet pressed on, deeper into the darkness. The maelstrom stretched around them like a living nightmare. The storm never rested, never paused. Gravity waves twisted space, lightning carved through the blackness, and every moment felt like standing on the edge of death. But for the crew, of the Resolute and the fleet that followed, something stronger than fear kept them moving. Hope. They had survived longer than anyone else had. That alone gave them courage. Captain Mira Solis stood at the center of the bridge, her gaze steady as the storm raged. "Report," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos outside. Commander Hale studied the holographic display, his brow furrowed. "The energy towers are everywhere. Each one feeds power into the storm, like arteries in a body. But they're not abandoned. I'm reading movement. Ships." Lyra Chen's hands tightened on the flight controls. "Ships? Out here? Who could survive in this?" The image flickered again. For a moment, dark shapes appeared, sleek, jagged, vessels moving within the storm, unharmed by its violence. Jonah Reyes slammed a hand against his console. "That's impossible. No ship should hold together in this." Mira's stomach tightened. "Unless the storm belongs to them." Silence fell. The crew had already suspected the storm was no natural disaster, but seeing ships glide through it as though it were their home made the truth undeniable. The alien fleet emerged from the darkness like predators circling prey. Their ships were unlike anything recorded in Alliance archives, angular, black as obsidian, and covered in glowing crimson lines that pulsed like veins. They moved with precision, hunting rather than charging. "They're not just surviving," Hale whispered. "They're guiding the storm." One of the alien ships broke formation, gliding closer to the Resolute. Its crimson lights flared, and suddenly the storm shifted. Lightning bent toward the humans. Gravity waves slammed harder against their hulls, as though the storm itself was being commanded. Lyra cursed, pulling the ship into a desperate roll. "They're controlling the maelstrom, weaponizing it." Mira gripped the railing. "Hale, identify them." He swallowed hard, his voice low. "I think I know. The archives speak of a species that vanished thousands of years ago. A warlike people who nearly destroyed half the galaxy before the Alliance was born. They were called the Vaith." The name chilled the air. Jonah spat the word like poison. "Extinct, my ass!" The alien ship opened fire. Streams of energy lashed out, not like lasers, but like claws of molten light. The Resolute shuddered as blasts ripped against its shields. "Return fire!" Mira ordered. Human cannons roared, but the shots scattered, barely scratching the Vaith ship. The enemy's hull seemed to drink the energy, glowing brighter with every strike. "They're absorbing it!" Jonah shouted. "Our weapons are feeding them!" The fleet scattered, weaving through the storm as the Vaith ships closed in. The horizon, still damaged from before, fell behind. "Captain, they're targeting us!" the young officer cried through comms. Mira's heart clenched. She would not lose them, not after saving them once. "All ships, draw their fire. Give the horizon cover." The human fleet obeyed without hesitation. They dove and twisted, their smaller size allowing them to slip through currents the Vaith could not follow. The humans fought not with brute force, but with speed, chaos, and courage. The Vaith, expecting prey, found themselves facing hunters. Still, the battle was brutal. The Vigilant took a hit, flames streaking from its engines. The Resolute's shields dropped to half. Crew shouted, alarms blared, and Jonah's voice crackled through the comms. "We're bleeding power, Captain. Another few hits and we're space dust." Mira's knuckles turned white as she held the railing. She remembered the laughter in the Alliance chamber, the doubt in every alien's eyes. If humanity fell here, it would confirm every word they had said. But if they survived, her decision came fast. "We don't match them in power, so we fight with what they don't understand. Improvisation." Hale looked at her sharply. "You mean—" "Yes." She pointed at the energy towers feeding the storm. "They control the maelstrom through those anchors. Jonah, can we overload them?" Jonah blinked, then grinned despite the chaos. "Maybe. If we feed unstable energy into their channels, it could backfire." "Do it," Mira ordered. "We're not here to win a war today. We're here to prove humanity doesn't." "Run!" The Resolute dove straight toward one of the massive towers, lightning flashing across its surface. Vaith ships closed in, sensing their plan. "Chen, thread the needle," Mira said softly. Lyra's hands blurred over the controls, guiding the ship through impossible gaps, dodging blasts by inches. Her breathing was ragged, but her eyes were fierce. "You want insane? I'll give you insane!" Jonah shouted from below deck. "Overloading reactor lines, now!" A surge of unstable energy ripped from the Resolute's cannons, slamming into the nearest tower. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the tower cracked, crimson lines splintering like broken glass. The storm shuddered. For the first time, the maelstrom faltered. The Vaith ships shrieked in strange, echoing tones, their lights flickering. "It worked!" Hale cried. "The storm isn't invincible!" Mira's eyes narrowed. "Then we just showed them something they've never seen before." But victory was not complete. The Vaith fleet regrouped, their weapons glowing brighter. The storm began to rage again, angrier than before. The Resolute shook violently, sparks flying across the bridge. Jonah's voice came through, rough with exhaustion. "We can't do that again, Captain. Systems are fried." Mira knew they were at the edge. One wrong move, and humanity would vanish into the storm like all the others. But even now, when fear threatened to crush them, she felt pride. Her crew hadn't broken. Her people hadn't yielded. "We've proven the maelstrom can bleed," Mira said quietly. "And if it can bleed, it can die." The fleet, though battered and scarred, cheered through comms. For the first time, the Vaith knew their prey had teeth. The battle wasn't over. In truth, it was just beginning. The storm raged louder than ever. Lightning arched across the black, painting the human fleet in flashes of fire. The maelstrom seemed alive, furious that the humans had wounded one of its anchors. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Mira Solis stood tall, her hands gripping the railing as the ship shook under another surge. Sparks spat from broken panels, and smoke clung to the air, but the crew held steady. "They're regrouping," Commander Hale said, his eyes locked on the tactical screen. Red markers swarmed around the fleet like wolves circling prey. "The Vaith won't underestimate us again." Jonah Reyes's voice cracked through the comms from engineering, hoarse and weary. "Shields at 20%, engines screaming. We've got nothing left to throw at them." Mira's eyes narrowed. "Then we stop fighting their way, we fight ours." The crew turned to her. Even in the storm's chaos, her voice was steady, unshaken. "We can't outgun them. We can't outrun them. But we've faced storms before. Hurricanes, quakes, wars. And we survived by adapting. That's what makes us human. We'll use the maelstrom itself as our weapon." The idea sounded impossible, but Hale's mind was already racing. "If we track the energy flows, we might be able to steer them. Redirect surges into Vaith ships." Jonah barked a laugh through the comm. "Steer the storm? That's madness." Mira's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then it's perfect." Lyra Chen's eyes gleamed as her fingers hovered over the controls. "Just tell me where to fly." Hale projected streams of data across the display, showing the rhythm Mira had noticed earlier, the hidden patterns beneath the chaos. "There. If we pass close to those fractures, the gravity waves will collapse behind us. With precise timing, they'll crush whatever follows," Mira finished. The Resolute dove into the storm, weaving between collapsing space and streams of lightning. The rest of the fleet followed, trusting Mira's instincts more than their own fear. The Vaith gave chase, confident they would corner their prey. But then the storm answered humanity's call. A Vaith cruiser lunged after them, its weapons glowing bright. Lyra swung the Resolute past a swirling rift, her timing flawless. The cruiser plowed straight into the fracture. In an instant, the ship twisted, snapped, and vanished into a tear of broken gravity. The humans gasped, then cheered. "They can bleed," Jonah whispered, "and they can break." The fleet moved like dancers across a deadly stage, weaving through lightning arcs, diving between storm currents. Where the Vaith tried to follow, the storm swallowed them. Mira's calm voice guided every move. "Now." "Left, Chen. Hold steady. Wait for the surge. Now roll." Each command was answered with precision. Each risk brought survival. And one by one, the predators found themselves hunted. 3 enemy ships destroyed, Hale reported, disbelief in his tone. "We're turning their own weapon against them." But the battle was far from won. The Vaith were ancient and cunning. They adapted quickly, pulling back from the worst of the storm's traps. The remaining ships closed ranks, moving as one, herding the human fleet toward a wall of lightning so dense it glowed like a burning sea. "They're trying to pin us in," Lyra warned. "One wrong move and we're ash." "Options?" Mira asked. "None good," Hale muttered. The bridge fell silent. The storm roared louder, like laughter from some cruel god. Then Jonah's voice came, rough but burning with stubbornness. "I can give us away. If I overload the Resolute's reactors and dump the charge into the storm, it'll trigger a surge, big enough to tear open a path." Mira's chest tightened. and big enough to fry you alive. Jonah chuckled weakly. Wouldn't be the first time I stuck my hands where they didn't belong. But if I don't, we're all dead anyway. The crew looked to Mira. She saw their fear, their exhaustion, but also their faith. Humanity had always been built on sacrifice. She hated it. But she knew Jonah was right. Do it, she said quietly. Her voice trembled just for a moment. But you come back to me, Reyes. That's an order. In the engineering bay, Jonah worked furiously, sweat pouring down his face. Sparks burned his skin and alarms screamed, but his hands never stopped. He poured unstable energy into the storm itself, daring the maelstrom to answer. And it did. A blinding surge ripped outward, a wall of light and force. Vaith ships scattered in panic as the wave tore through their formation. One was caught, too. Slow, it shattered, flames devouring its hull. The others fled into the storm's shadows. On the bridge, the crew shielded their eyes. When the light faded, a clear corridor stretched ahead, carved by Jonah's reckless gamble. "We have a path," Hale shouted. Lyra gunned the engines, and the fleet surged forward, battered but alive. Jonah's voice came through the comm, faint but alive. "Still here. Barely. Someone get me a drink after this." Relief and laughter broke through the bridge. Mira let out the breath she had been holding, her hands trembling for the first time. "You did it, Jonah! You stubborn fool!" The fleet pushed deeper, past wreckage and silence. For a time, only the hum of engines filled the void, but everyone knew the Vaith were still out there, watching, waiting. Mira stood at the center of the bridge, her voice low but strong. "They thought this storm would end us. They thought humanity would break like all the others. But we've shown them the truth." Her eyes burned with fire. "We don't just survive storms. We learn to dance with them." And though the storm raged on, the crew felt something stronger than fear. Hope. The maelstrom had found its first true challenge. The corridor carved by Jonah's surge carried the fleet deeper into the maelstrom. The storm's fury still surrounded them, but for the first time it felt like humanity was not merely surviving, it was pushing forward. On the bridge of the Resolute, Mira Solis studied the fading patterns of lightning on the display. Her hands rested firmly on the railing, but her mind was racing. "We've wounded the storm," she said quietly. "But storms don't bleed unless something lives inside them." Commander Hale turned to her. His eyes were sharp, though shadowed by fatigue. "Captain, if this is a weapon, then there must be a heart, a control center." Jonah's voice crackled through the comm from engineering, hoarse but steady. "Whatever it is, it's huge. Energy flows are all converging deeper in. Feels like the storm is hiding something." Mira's jaw tightened. "Then that's where we go." Hours passed as the fleet moved cautiously through twisting currents. Hulls groaned, shields flickered, and every crew member felt the weight of exhaustion. Yet no one complained. Humanity had been underestimated for so long. Now each of them carried the fire of proving the galaxy wrong. It was Lyra Chen who first saw it. Her eyes widened as the storm ahead parted, revealing a vast silhouette. "Captain, you need to see this." The maelstrom's lightning lit it in fragments, colossal towers of black metal rising from the void, linked by bridges of crimson light. They stretched across space like the skeleton of a dead god, anchored into the very fabric of reality. At the center hung a massive sphere, pulsing with energy, its glow feeding every arc of lightning in the storm. The crew fell silent. "It's a fortress," Hale whispered. "Built inside the maelstrom itself," Jonah muttered a curse. "And that sphere, that's their heart, their generator. Without it, the storm doesn't exist." Mira's voice was steady, though awe shook her bones. "Then we've found the Vaith's nest." The silence didn't last. Alarms screamed as Vaith ships emerged from the shadows, dozens of them. They had been waiting, guarding their fortress like sentinels. Their crimson lights glowed brighter, as if the storm itself gave them strength. Hale slammed his fist against the console. "We're outnumbered 10-1. "Numbers don't decide survival," Mira said calmly. "Choices do. The Vaith, fleet advanced in perfect formation, their weapons glowing. The maelstrom flared with them, lightning bending to their will. Humanity's small fleet looked fragile in comparison, yet not a single ship broke position. "This is it," Mira said, softly, almost to herself. "The galaxy thought the sky was empty. Instead, it's filled with monsters." She lifted her head, fire in her eyes. "But monsters can fall." The battle ignited. Vaith ships poured fire into the storm, forcing lightning to lash at the humans. Lyra threw the Resolute into rolls and dives, weaving through chaos. The rest of the fleet scattered, each ship moving unpredictably, refusing to be boxed in. "Target the towers!" Hale shouted. "Every shot weakens their control!" Cannons roared. Human fire slammed into the black spires, sending shards of metal spinning into the storm. Each collapse made the maelstrom tremble, its rhythm faltering. But the cost was high. The Vigilant took a direct hit, flames consuming its midsection. The crew's desperate voices filled the comm before silence cut them off. Mira's heart twisted, but she didn't flinch. "We honor them by pushing forward. Reyes, can you give me more power?" Jonah's laugh came bitter but alive. "Captain, I've got systems duct taped together with spit and prayers. But for you, I'll make them sing." The fleet pressed on, closing toward the sphere at the storm's heart. Lightning surged wilder now, uncontrolled, as though the Vaith were losing their grip. "Captain," Lyra cried. "The storm's shifting again, stronger than before." Hale's face darkened as he studied the readings. "They're not just defending, they're expanding. The maelstrom is growing outward. If they unleash it, it won't stop at Frontier Systems. It'll consume the core worlds." The truth hit the crew like ice. The maelstrom wasn't a weapon of defense, it was conquest. A storm designed to devour galaxies. If the Alliance knew, Lyra began, her voice shaking. "They'd panic," Mira finished grimly. "That's why we're here, to stop this before anyone else even understands the danger." She straightened, her voice ringing with steel. "We may be small, we may be human, but right now, we are the only shield between the galaxy and extinction. So we fight." The fleet dove toward the central sphere, every engine screaming. Vaith ships swarmed like hornets, trying to block their path. Explosions lit the storm, fragments spinning into the void. Humanity fought with reckless creativity, decoys, sudden dives, and desperate maneuvers no other species would dare attempt. Jonah's systems burned hot, smoke filling his deck, but his laughter carried through the comm. "They don't know crazy like humans do." One by one, Vaith ships faltered, caught in their own storm. But more replaced them. The enemy seemed endless. Still, Mira's eyes never left the glowing sphere. Every beat of its pulse fed the storm. Every flicker of its light whispered a promise. "Destroy me, and the galaxy is free." She spoke softly, a vow to herself and to her crew. "We will reach it, no matter the cost." The storm raged, the enemy closed, and humanity's fleet pressed forward, small, scarred, and battered, but unbroken. And in that moment, even as death loomed on all sides, a spark of something greater lit inside them. Not just survival, not just defiance, destiny. The storm roared like a living beast, its voice shaking metal and bone alike. The Resolute led the battered human fleet through the chaos, every ship scarred, every crew exhausted. Yet no one faltered. They had come too far to turn back. The central sphere pulsed in the distance, its glow feeding the lightning like blood through veins. The Vaith guarded it with relentless precision, their ships weaving through the storm as though they were born in it. On the bridge, Mira Solis stood tall, her knuckles white against the railing. "That's our target," she said firmly. "We cut out the heart. The storm dies." Commander Hale's voice was grim. "And if we fail?" She didn't look away from the sphere. "Then the galaxy falls." Jonah Reyes was already moving. His engineering deck was a haze of smoke, wires hanging loose, panels sparking with every surge. His body trembled from exhaustion, but his hands worked steady. "Captain," he called over the comm, his voice hoarse but alive. "I've rerouted auxiliary power into the forward batteries. It'll burn the coils, maybe even tear the mounts apart, but you'll get one good strike." Mira closed her eyes for a moment. One strike, one chance. That was all they had ever needed. "Do it, Reyes," she ordered. The fleet broke formation, scattering through the storm. Lyra Chen's hands danced over the controls as she threw the Resolute into sudden dives and sharp rolls, weaving between walls of lightning and enemy fire. The Vaith pursued in tight formations, their precision cold and terrifying. "Lyra," Hale warned, gripping the console. "They're trying to herd us away from the sphere." "Then let's show them what a human pilot can do," she replied, teeth clenched, eyes blazing. The Resolute twisted through a gap no sane pilot would have attempted, scraping past an eruption of plasma that scorched its hull. Two Vaith ships followed, only to collide with each other in the narrow passage. The explosion lit the storm, and Lyra laughed breathlessly. "They think like machines," she muttered. "But we don't." The human fleet fought savagely. Ships darted unpredictably, sacrificing shields to land brutal strikes. Every maneuver was reckless, every tactic improvised, but that was humanity's strength. They turned chaos into strategy. The Defiance rammed a Vaith cruiser head-on, its captain shouting defiantly until both ships vanished in a flare of light. The crew of the Endeavor launched decoy drones that tricked enemy fire into tearing through their own allies. Yet the cost was terrible. One by one, human ships were cut down. The comm channels filled with final cries, vows to fight to the last, and sudden silence. Mira heard every voice. Each loss carved deeper into her heart, but she stood unbroken. "We honor them," she said softly, "by finishing this." At last, the Resolute broke through the last line of defenders. The sphere loomed before them, vast, radiant, alive. Lightning bent toward it, feeding it endlessly, as though the storm worshipped its creator. Jonah's voice cut in, strained but steady. "Forward batteries charged, Captain. But the coils are overloading. After this shot, we'll be flying blind." "That's enough," Mira replied. "Then say the word," he whispered, her gaze locked on the sphere. She felt the weight of every life behind her, every hope of every world that didn't yet know the danger waiting beyond the storm. Humanity had been called reckless, weak, fragile. Now they would prove what fragility could do when cornered. Fire. The Resolute shook as the cannons roared. Energy surged forward in a blinding beam, ripping through the storm. It struck the sphere dead center. For one heartbeat, the light dimmed, and then the sphere answered. A surge of power exploded outward, brighter than any star. Shields collapsed instantly, lightning lashed in every direction, and the fleet was thrown like leaves in a hurricane. Panels burst, engines screamed, and screams filled the comms. On the bridge, Mira was thrown to the deck. The lights flickered, smoke filling the air. "Report!" she shouted. The shot pierced it, Hale yelled back, gripping a sparking console. "But it's not destroyed. It's angry." The sphere pulsed again, stronger. The maelstrom howled, waves of energy spreading outward, and Mira understood. "They're not just powering the storm," she whispered. "They are the storm. The Vaith have merged with it. Destroying the heart means tearing out their very existence." Lyra's eyes widened in horror. "Then, if we succeed, they'll take us all with them." For a long moment, silence hung on the bridge, broken only by the storm's roar. The crew stared at Mira, waiting, afraid. She rose slowly, her voice calm, steady, unshaken. Then we finish what we started. Humanity doesn't run from impossible choices. We make them, and we endure. Hale met her gaze, then nodded. To the last. Jonah's laugh crackled faintly over the comm. Guess I better keep these engines together a little longer then. Lyra's hands tightened on the controls, her eyes blazing. Let's show them what humans are made of. The Resolute and the surviving ships surged forward, battered but unyielding. Every cannon fired, every engine screamed. The Vaith swarmed to stop them. But humanity pressed on, carving their way closer to the sphere. The storm shook, the enemy raged, and death loomed on every side. But still, humanity advanced, and in that furious moment, every crew member felt the same truth burn in their hearts. They were small, fragile, and mortal. Yet they carried within them a fire no storm could ever extinguish. They were human, and they would not fall quietly. The storm was no longer just around them. It was inside their bones, inside their blood. The maelstrom screamed with fury as the human fleet clawed toward the pulsing sphere at its core. Every strike they landed dimmed its light for a heartbeat, and every counterattack tore more ships from the sky. On the bridge of the Resolute, Mira Solis wiped blood from her brow. Smoke stung her eyes, but her voice was steel. "Status?" she demanded. Hale's voice came ragged. "We've lost the Vanguard and Hope's End. Only 6 ships remain with us. Shields at 30%, engines running on fumes. Then 6 ships will finish this," Mira said, her tone calm, absolute. Lyra Chen's fingers never slowed, even as the console burned beneath her hands. Sweat ran into her eyes, but her focus never wavered. "I can get us closer," she muttered. But the Vaith aren't giving ground. On the screen, the alien ships closed in, perfect formations moving like blades. The humans were scattered, broken, but still they pressed forward, firing from every angle, striking like cornered wolves. Jonah Reyes's voice crackled through the comm. "Captain, I can overload the reactor, turn it into a bomb. If we can't kill the sphere from the outside, we'll burn it from within." Mira froze. She felt the crew's eyes on her, their breaths caught in silence. To order, that would mean suicide for every soul aboard. "No," she said firmly. "Not yet. As long as we breathe, we fight to live." There was a long pause. Then, Jonah laughed quietly. "That's why you're in command." The storm struck again, lightning splitting the void. One of the remaining ships, the Aurora's spear, was torn apart, its final transmission a scream of courage. "For Earth! For all of us!" The shock wave rattled the Resolute, and Lyra swore under her breath. "At this rate, we won't even reach the sphere." But Mira only stared at the glowing core, her eyes burning with something fierce. "We'll reach it. Because we must." Then something strange happened. The storm hesitated. For the briefest instant, the sphere's light flickered. Not from the cannons, not from the human assault, but from inside. Jonah saw it too. His voice shook as he spoke over the comm. "Captain, did you see that? It wasn't us. Something inside the sphere is breaking." Hale frowned. "The Vaith don't make mistakes. They don't falter." "Unless," Mira whispered, "they're afraid." The idea was impossible. The Vaith had always fought like machines, cold and certain. But fear was human. The Resolute pressed closer. The sphere loomed so large now it filled the viewport, its surface swirling with storms of its own. Flashes of energy crackled like veins of lightning running under its skin. Suddenly, a deep sound vibrated through the void, a voice, vast and alien, echoing across every frequency. It wasn't words, not exactly, but a raw wave of thought. Lyra clutched her head. God, it's inside my mind. Jonah's voice cracked. They're speaking, or screaming. And Mira understood. The Vaith were not just ships, not just conquerors. They were bound to the storm, fused into its core. Destroying the sphere meant tearing apart their very essence. They're not gods, Mira said slowly. They're prisoners of their own creation. The fleet pressed on. The Resolute took hit after hit, the hull groaning, the lights dying. The storm tried to tear them apart, but humanity's stubborn fire burned on. Another ship fell, the Ironclad, vanishing into the lightning. With a final burst of defiance, only 4 ships remained now. Hale's voice trembled. Captain, at this rate— I know, Mira said softly. But even if one ship survives, one spark survives, then it's enough. She turned to the crew, her voice rising above the storm's roar. They thought humanity was fragile, that we would break in the dark, but they forgot one thing. Fire is fragile too, and fire can burn a forest to ash. The crew straightened, their fear burning away into something else, something fierce. As they drew near, the sphere struck with everything it had. Lightning ripped through the Resolute, fire tearing across the bridge. Alarms screamed, panels burst, and the ship shuddered as though ready to split in two. Jonah's voice shouted through the chaos. Engines are gone! We're drifting! Lyra fought the controls, her face streaked with soot. I can still guide us, if the storm doesn't tear the hull apart first. Mira's gaze locked on the heart of the storm. The sphere's light blazed brighter than ever. Yet it flickered at the edges, trembling, unstable, and she realized the truth. They're not invincible, she whispered. They're terrified. The storm's voice thundered again, a raw cry that shook the stars. For the first time, Mira felt it, not as rage, but as desperation. The Vaith had tied their existence to this storm, and now they were trapped in its endless fury. They fought not just to win, but to survive. Mira's hands tightened on the railing. Then let's give them something they've never faced before. Hale looked at her. And what's that? Hope, she said simply. The last human ships pulled together, forming a wedge around the Resolute. Side by side, scarred and broken, they pushed into the storm with every weapon firing. The void lit with their defiance, a storm within the storm! Lyra screamed with effort as she forced the dying ship forward. Jonah held the reactor together with his bare hands, sparks searing his arms. Hale braced himself at the console, shouting orders to the last crews still alive, and Mira stood at the heart of it all, unshaken. The sphere blazed, the storm shrieked, and humanity answered with a fire that would not die. In that moment, the maelstrom itself seemed to hesitate. And for the first time since the war began, the Vaith faltered. Humanity had done the impossible. They had made the storm afraid. The last 4 human ships fought like dying stars, burning brighter the closer they came to death. The Resolute, scarred and shaking, led the way. Behind it, the Starlents, the Endeavor, and the Guardian fired volley after volley into the maelstroms. Heart. Every blast lit up the storm like cracks in glass. On the bridge of the Resolute, Mira Solis stood tall, though her knees trembled. Smoke filled the air. Every console burned with sparks, but her voice never wavered. Forward, she commanded. No matter what, forward. Her crew obeyed without hesitation, not because she ordered it, but because they believed. Jonah Reyes was still at the reactor, sweat pouring down his face as alarms screamed around him. The engine was no longer a machine. It was a beast thrashing against its chains. Each pulse nearly threw him to the ground. Captain, he shouted over the comm. We're seconds from overload. Hold it together, Jonah, Mira answered. Her voice was steady, but her heart pounded in her chest. Just a little longer. Jonah laughed weakly. You're asking me to hold back a star, you know. Then be a star, Mira said. And somehow, he did. Lyra Chen guided the ship through, waves of lightning that could have swallowed a planet. Her hands bled where shards of glass had cut her skin, but she ignored the pain. Every jolt threatened to throw the ship into oblivion, but she kept it steady, eyes locked on the pulsing sphere that now filled the entire viewport. "Almost there," she whispered. "Almost." Hale barked reports, his voice hoarse. "Shields are gone. Hull breach on decks 4 and 6. The Guardian is down. Repeat, the Guardian is gone." The fleet was now 3 ships, but none slowed. The sphere's glow changed. It pulsed faster, more uneven, like a heart under strain. Then the storm's voice returned, deep, shaking, but now filled with something unexpected. It was not rage, it was sorrow. Lyra gasped as the sound rattled inside her skull. "They're begging," she whispered. "They don't want to fight anymore." Hale clenched his fists. "Begging? After burning our colonies? After slaughtering billions?" But Mira's gaze softened as she listened. The Vaith's cry was not the cry of tyrants. It was the cry of prisoners. "They're trapped," Mira said. "They forged this storm to conquer, but it chained them instead. Every strike we land tears them apart inside." Jonah's voice broke in, ragged and faint. "So destroying the sphere means destroying them too." For the first time, doubt filled the bridge. To kill the Vaith meant freedom for the galaxy. But it also meant extinguishing a people who had once been something more than conquerors. Mira closed her eyes. The images of lost human colonies filled her mind. Cities turned to ash. Families. Broken. Earth itself scarred. She whispered to herself, "Mercy does not mean forgetting." Then her eyes opened, burning with resolve. "If they want freedom, then let them earn it. We'll break the storm. But if the Vaith survive, they must choose another path." The ships pushed closer. Lightning raked their hulls, tearing away. Steel and fire. The Starlance was split in 2, its death shock rocking the fleet. Only 2 ships remained, the Resolute and the Endeavor. Hale shouted, "Captain, we can't take much more." Mira's voice was iron. "We don't need much more. Just one strike, one chance." The sphere's surface rippled, and for a moment a vast opening appeared, like a wound. Inside was a core of raw energy, swirling, unstable, vulnerable. Mira seized the moment. "All power to forward batteries. Hit it now." The Endeavor responded first, unleashing every missile, every cannon. The Resolute followed, firing with its last reserves. Beams of light slammed into the wound, tearing deeper. The sphere screamed, a cry of fury and agony that shook the stars themselves. The storm began to collapse inward. Its lightning faltered. Its winds weakened. But the victory came at a cost. The Endeavor was caught in the collapse. It vanished in a blaze of white fire, sacrificing itself to keep the wound open. Only the Resolute remained. On the bridge, sparks fell like rain. The hull creaked as if the ship itself were begging to rest. Jonah's voice was faint, almost a whisper. "Reactors at critical. She won't hold any longer." Mira stood straight, staring into the collapsing core. She knew what had to be done. "Then we drive her in," she said softly. Lyra turned to her, eyes wide with horror. "Captain, that's suicide." Mira smiled, weary but unbroken. "If one ship can end the storm, then one ship is enough." But before she could give the order, something happened. The storm's voice returned. Not rage, not sorrow, but something else. A whisper. A plea. It was not words, yet Mira understood. Help us. The Vaith were no longer enemies in that moment. They were souls begging to be freed from chains of their own making. Mira's chest tightened. Humanity had always been underestimated, mocked for its fragility. But fragility was not weakness. Fragility meant choice. It meant the ability to fall and the courage to rise again. And now, humanity had a choice: destroy or save. Mira lifted her head. Jonah, Lyra, Hail, listen carefully. We're not ending them. We're ending the storm. If the Vaith survive, they must carry the weight of their choices. That is their punishment. That is their chance. Her crew stared at her, exhausted, broken. Yet they nodded. Then let's do it, Hale said hoarsely. Jonah gave a weak grin. One last miracle, huh? Lyra whispered. One last flight. The Resolute dived straight into the heart of the sphere. Energy tore at the ship, ripping steel, shredding systems. Alarms howled. The bridge shook like an earthquake, but they pressed on. Mira's voice rang above the chaos, calm and fierce. Humanity does not run. Humanity does not bow. We endure, and we choose. The reactor flared one last time. Jonah forced the power into the forward core, turning the ship itself into a blazing spear of light. The Resolute struck the wound of the sphere, and the maelstrom began to break. The storm unraveled in silence. The darkness split with white fire, spreading outward, then collapsing inward, as if the universe itself inhaled. The lightning died, the winds faded, and the great sphere shattered into shards of light that drifted away into the void. When the glow cleared, only silence remained. The Resolute was gone, but the storm was no more. Silence ruled the galaxy. Where once the maelstrom had stretched like a storm without end, there was now only open space, calm, still, waiting. The storm that had devoured fleets, broken worlds, and enslaved civilizations was gone. For the first time in centuries, the stars shone free, yet among them, there was no sign of the Resolute. In the command chamber of the Alliance station orbiting Helios Prime, leaders of many worlds gathered. Tall insectoid strategists of the Kalar hissed their disbelief. The crystalline Tavari pulsed with unease. Even the proud and ancient Auran, who once saw humans as children among titans, stood in silence. Admiral Korra of the Vaith was there too. No longer an enemy, but a figure bowed by shame. The storm's breaking had freed her people from chains. They had forged and worn. For the first time in her long life, she stood without arrogance. The council chamber felt heavy with the absence of one small species, the humans who had walked into the storm and not returned. They are gone, whispered Akelar, its mandibles trembling. Extinguished! The storm devoured them! But High Speaker Valric of the Tavari shook his crystalline head, light shimmering across his facets. No, he said softly. They burned brighter than any storm. They are not gone, not truly. Far from the station, wreckage drifted in, the quiet void, the broken hulls of ships swallowed by the maelstrom. Among them, a miracle stirred. The shattered remains of the Resolute glowed faintly. Held together by sheer will and fragments of power, Jonah Reyes had forced into the reactor. Before the end. It was not alive, not fully, but it was not gone. Inside what was left of the ship, Mira Solis opened her eyes. Pain coursed through her body, but breath filled her lungs. She looked around, smoke, fire, ruin, and yet in the corner of her vision, movement. Lyra Chen still breathed, pale but alive. Hale sat slumped against a wall, bleeding but conscious, his eyes burning with the same fire as always. Jonah lay against the reactor housing, his chest rising and falling with the shallow rhythm of exhaustion. They were not dead. Against every law of survival, they lived, Mira whispered, her throat dry. We did it. Hale gave a broken laugh. Of course we did. We're human. Rescue ships found them days later, guided by the faint distress beacon Jonah had forced online with the last sparks of the reactor. When the humans were brought back to Helios Prime, the galaxy watched in stunned silence. Mira Solis stepped into the council chamber, bruised, scarred, and carrying the weight of the storm in her eyes. Behind her came Lyra, Jonah, and Hale, survivors, not heroes in their own eyes, but something greater in the eyes of the galaxy. The chamber erupted, not in mockery, not in dismissal, but in awe. The Auran bowed, the Tovari pulsed with light. Even the Kalar bent their tall bodies low. For the first time, humanity was not seen as fragile newcomers. They were seen as saviors. Admiral Cora of the Vaith stepped forward. Her voice trembled as she spoke, something no Vaith had shown before. Your people had every right to destroy us, to end us with the storm, and yet, you chose differently. Mira's gaze was steady. We chose because choice is what makes us human. Mercy is not weakness. Mercy is strength. Cora bowed her head. Then the Vaith will remember this, and we will never forget who freed us. In the days that followed, stories spread across the galaxy. Children of distant worlds painted human ships on the walls of their schools. Veterans of alien fleets told their people that when the void was darkest, it was humanity that lit the way. But for the humans who survived, glory was not what mattered. One night, aboard a quiet orbital station, Mira and her crew sat together. No medals, no councils, just 4 people who had walked through fire and come back. Jonah leaned back, staring at the stars through the viewport. You know, he murmured, I think we just rewrote history. Lyra smiled faintly. History will forget our names, but it will remember what humanity is capable of. Hale raised a glass of water, his voice rough but firm. To the ones who didn't make it, the Endeavor, the Starlins, the Guardian, they were the real heroes. Mira lifted her gaze to the stars. No, we're all heroes. Every human who stood when others doubted us. Every soul who refused to bow to fear. That's what it means to be who we are. For a long time they sat in silence, watching the stars, free stars, no longer chained by storms. Centuries later, when the story was told and retold, the final moment of the Resolute was always spoken in hushed awe. How one fragile ship, carrying fragile beings, had dived into a storm that could consume worlds and chosen not destruction, but mercy. It became the tale that defined humanity across the galaxy, and the last words of that story were always the same. They thought the sky belonged to the storm, but it was humanity that taught the stars how to shine again.